Our first speaker of the morning, our keynote speaker, is Doug Peterson. Doug comes to us from the state of Missouri, and he is, now his title is the, find it here, the State Soil Health Conservationist. Doug has worked for NRCS in the state of Missouri for over 25 years and has done a lot of work with soil conservation, especially over the last probably 15 to 20 years, working on the grassland impact of soil health. Doug has also a very practical side to himself in that he runs cattle in the state, runs an operation with, I believe, his father, and has reclaimed a lot of land down there in that state. I saw his presentations before at national conferences on putting land back into production with the grazing animal. So Doug is going to talk to us for about the next 45 minutes on the topic of using soil health and using grazing animal to improve our soil lands of the country. So Doug, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, sir. So am I good on sound? Everybody can hear that? We got this adjusted about right. So the video guy back there is going to have to be really good because I don't stand still very well. So you know that if I was in school today, I'd probably have some initials behind me, you know, ADD or ADHD or something like that. So you know, I'll try to not move around too much back there. You know, there's a ton of information going around the country right now on soil health, isn't there? Boy, you can't hardly pick up a magazine that doesn't have something about cover crops or soil health in it, particularly in the cropland side of things. So I'm going to try to talk about what I see as the building blocks of pasture soil health from a cropland or from a grassland situation. So why soil health? You know, that's the question. Why soil health? Why is it we have this revolution going on right now? Well, and it's something that's not new to you grazers. You know, we're going to use management instead of money. We're going to use management instead of inputs, right? That's the premise of it. And so we're going to use that soil health management to not only improve our agricultural economy, but also to make sure that we're doing it we're producing that profit without sacrificing our environment. That's the real goal. So how do we define a healthy soil? What's gonna tell us we have a healthy soil? You do have to participate, okay? Didn't Cable tell you guys that?
Bacteria and fungal.
Okay? Good biologic activity, okay? And we'll get more into that as we go here. What else?
Normality of function.
Normality of function. What kind of functions? Huh?
All kinds.
All kinds.
Yield, quality.
Good water infiltration. I'm going to talk basics, okay? Because I know we've got probably some cover crop folks, some forage people, you know, some grazers. I tend to be mostly a grazer myself, but so a healthy soil, it's going to have a stable surface. You know, the job one is to prevent the loss of that soil. You know, and yes, I work for NRCS, but I got to tell you, there's days when I don't think we've done a very good job of that. You know, when we continue to have the erosion amounts that we do. Is increasing in soil organic carbon or organic matter, or is that the maximum level for its location? You know, how many places have the most organic matter that they potentially can have, and we'll talk more about that. Not very many, in my opinion. And so that's what I'm going to give you is my opinions today, okay? Since Cable, and you can yell at Cable, okay? He just told me to come in here and just hit you right between the eyes, right? Isn't that what you said, Cable? Something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. We're just going to try to lay it out. So, doesn't contain nutrients or chemicals in amounts that are going to leach or wash out, okay? And is regenerative. And I think that's the most important one. You know, there's a lot of land that whether it was my fault personally or yours, you know, there's been a lot of land in the last 100 years that has been abused, right? And so we've got to figure out not how just to stabilize that surface, but we've got to figure out how to restore that land. You know, and NRCS, you know, and I'll pick on NRCS because I've worked for them for a long time. So we got a poster. We got a poster in our offices, in a lot of offices, that show, oh, you know, in the time that it took to do all this stuff, and it basically lists 400 years worth of stuff. That's how long it took to build an inch of topsoil. You know, I don't believe that. As a soil scientist, I don't believe that anymore. We can restore this land. We can change the productivity of it very dramatically with the right tools. We're going to talk about that. So the soil performs a lot of functions. It regulates water, it filters pollutants, it cycles nutrients. You know, and the very top one, I think that's the one that's going to be, that is coming to the forefront. You know, the urban areas, you know, you start talking to them about soil health and soil productivity and erosion, they kind of gloss over. But you start talking to those folks about their water, and they start perking up, don't they? And I think we're seeing that because of all the issues going on around the country now with urban areas, with the issues between urban areas and their water source and the ag community. And we're seeing that. So we've got to work on that. So what's the differences? Now this area right here where we're at, was it historically a wooded area for the most part? Okay. So what's the differences in organic matter in a forest soil and in a where I come from, in a grassland derived soil? Which one has more soil organic matter? Grassland, okay. Which one has but all the carbon, and we're not going to talk carbon sequestration, okay? I'm not going to go down that road. But which one stores the carbon? People talk about woods, timberland storing a lot of carbon, don't they? And they do. But what's the difference between where a grassland does it and where a woodland does it? Above and below, right? So here's the issue. So you've got these timber-derived soils that had this huge carbon source, but when they came in and started farming this country, what did they do with that carbon? Did they chop it up and incorporate it into the land? They burned it off, didn't they? So your land lost its carbon source, which the soil is a carbon-driven system. It lost its carbon source, boom, like that. Whereas the prairies that had all this carbon in the soil, it took 2, 3, 4 generations for us to burn down burn that carbon source up, right? So now, if you want your soils that were originally a timber-derived soils, unless you want them to go back to timber, you want to manage them like a prairie soil, don't you? And so that's what we're going to talk about a little bit. So what really determines our potential organic matter? Our management. You know, and there's two things: how much organic material you grow and how fast it's remineralized. So who has more potential to build soil organic matter? Somebody that's got 20 inches of rain, or somebody that's got 50 inches of rain? 50. Is that all there is to it? It's just rainfall? Temperature. What about temperature?
The higher it is, the faster carbon goes away.
The higher it is, the faster carbon goes away. Really, more correctly, it's the faster of biologic decay, biologic activity. So on one side, you build organic matter by the plant mature, by the rainfall that you get. On the other side, am I going and coming away here? On the other side, you have how fast it's remineralized, right? So Neil Dennis, a lot of you guys know him, in Canada. You know, 20 inches of rain, not a lot of rain compared to you or me, but 20 inches of rain, but he's got some 10, 12% organic matter stuff. Because while he doesn't grow a lot of material, the season of biologic activity is really short. So it's not remineralized very fast. Okay, go into the southeast, North Carolina, say, 50 inches of rain. They can grow a lot of material, but their potential for organic matter is very low, maybe 3%. Because they have biologic activity, they have that remineralization process 12 months a year, okay? So you guys in Missouri, we're kind of somewhere in between, and it depends. Obviously, your state's fairly long, north to south, kind of like Missouri is, so there's a big difference between north and south. So what's the potential? You know, you say, well, our state was, or this part of the state was you know, in a timbered soil. What was it? What do your soils show today? Organic matter wise. Soil test. 2%? 2, 3, 4%? Okay, and I'd say that's probably typical. What we see in most of soils that are either tilled or that are grazed, you know, fairly hard, we see about that. That's the equilibrium level that with your climate, your management, that's where they're going to be. Now, does that mean you can't build them? They were timber soils, so you can't build them, right? If you treat them like a grassland, if you treat them like a prairie soil, you can build them. You can significantly increase that organic matter. The other thing, the water cycle that I want to get started on before we get started into the real meat here, the water cycle. Everybody understands the water cycle, right? It rains, some of it soaks in, some of it runs off, it goes out, makes its way out to the ocean, it evaporates, and it starts all over. Everybody had that in school, right? You guys did go to school up here, didn't you? You didn't all just live in the woods? Okay. Half of them. Which half here? So everybody, you know, we got a big picture of the water cycle. But do we understand the most important part of that? The most important part of that water cycle is that interaction right at the surface of the soil. That interaction at the surface of the soil. Do you get good infiltration? How fast is the evaporation back out? You know, we've had a great discussion going on a discussion group that we participate in that has talked about land cover and how it affects rainfall patterns, how it affects weather. Okay, and it's been very interesting, hadn't it, Cable? So that surface cover is the most important part of it. How much water we get. It doesn't matter if you get 40 or 50 inches of rain if you only actively capture, you know, 10, 20% of it, and that's what we're doing. If we don't have ground cover, and I'm going to show you a couple pictures of rainfall simulator here in a minute. I tell you what, as a grass guy, I had thought that even the poorest managed grass was probably was so much better from an infiltration standpoint than a crop field. Boy, was I wrong. I got to tell you, that rainfall simulator is really opening our eyes to how much runoff is truly occurring from pastures or from hay fields. So these are the 5 principles that we teach in soil health in general. In a cropland situation, I do the same principles from a pasture situation. And so we're going to go through the first 4 of them here this morning, and then the 5th one is what I'll cover this afternoon. So manage more by disturbing less, diversity from a lot of standpoints, feeding our soil livestock with a living root, having a living root all year long, which in a perennial situation is not a big deal. If you're talking an annual crop situation, that's a whole different thing. Keeping the soil covered. So we're going to go through these. Manage more by disturbing less. So there's a couple kinds of disturbance. Most of us are familiar with the physical disturbance, right? We've also got chemical disturbance, and we're not going to get too much into that. Physical disturbance, this is what most of us are used to, right? Tillage. So that tillage is what it causes all kinds of issues. And we've seen a tremendous increase in that in Missouri in the last few years. You guys probably have as well. That's what most of us are used to. And so if you've got a grazing situation where you're using annuals, no-till has got to be the beginning of that system. And I'm not going to get too far into that, but I'm just here to tell you, no-till has got to be the beginning of that system if you're getting into annuals at all. Mainly, I'm going to talk about perennials. We can have chemical disturbances as well, either pesticides, fertilizers, and manures. And I'm not saying we shouldn't use any of those, but I am saying that we need to understand how they influence what we're doing. Some of them are some salts. We understand that. Even manure. You know, I had the chance here 3 or 4 years ago to have some manure applied. And I thought, you know, I did the math on what was in it, and we still needed some fertility on some stuff. This was actually on a rented place. And, you know, the math came out really good. So I said, okay, fine. So they came on and applied it. And putting, and they didn't put, you know, it was not sludge. It was just liquid hog effluent. So it wasn't super hot. But when we put that on, they put that on in the middle of the summer. You know, I didn't want any ruts or anything, so we put it on when it was dry. Our cool season grasses were pretty much dormant at that time. So how much of that were they going to take up very quickly? Boy, not very much, right? So what did that big shot of fertility right in the middle of the summer stimulate? Ragweed, okay? Because that was a disturbance. It was fertility, it was nutrients, but at that time of year in that form, and it overwhelmed the system. It was more than the system could handle, and so I got a flush of ragweed that was 6 foot tall, okay, in a very thick perennial pasture. So that's just, we need to understand the implications of those. There's the two last things I'm going to talk about here on disturbance. Grazing is a disturbance that can set succession back. So everybody understands succession, right? What's succession? You probably understand it better than people out west. So if you take a bare crop field, you walk away from it, what's it going to do? It's going to start out coming into weeds, isn't it? Then what's it going to go to? Perennials, some biennials maybe, and then some grasses, and then shrubs, and then trees eventually in this environment. Ours is the same way. And so that's succession. So which, from a soil health standpoint, which one is going to have at what stage along that line of succession from bare soil to trees are we going to have most likely the healthiest soil, the best bacteria to fungal ratio? And that's just one indicator, but from that standpoint. Clear up here, right? Okay. Trees are more fungal than grasses tend to be. So from a soil health standpoint, we want that soil to be as far up this graph of succession, right? This line of succession. We know that tilled soils are very low in biologic activity compared to grasses or compared to trees, to a forest. So we want, strictly from a soil health standpoint, we want it to be as far up that line of succession as possible. But yet, is it very easy to graze those trees? Not unless you got really tall cows. And cow size is a whole nother discussion, okay? So we don't want it to be in trees, but yet we want it to be as far up this line of succession as possible. So we want to come back from the trees, but we still want to be up here. So grazing is a disturbance. Running a set of cows across a field is a disturbance that's going to set succession back. If you graze it, what are you going to do? You're going to set succession back. So if we want to keep it as far up here as possible, just keep it back from the trees. We want really as few grazing events as possible. We want as few grazing events as possible. But yet, we want to maintain our stocking rate, don't we? So how do we do that? Well, lengthening those rest periods means less grazing events, but lengthening and maintaining that stocking rate, we've got to do what? We've got to utilize more effectively the forage that we are grazing while we're there. So this is just a great example. Or we got to utilize plants that maybe our cows wouldn't normally graze. So this is a great example. This is down in South Missouri. Mark Brownlee, a friend, who started moving cows twice a day, morning and night. And so This is sumac. This is a shrubby, woody plant, okay? 24 hours later, it looks like that. Because at that intensive of a grazing management, his cows learned to eat plants they wouldn't necessarily have eaten before. So by utilizing plants that we wouldn't have eaten before, that the cows wouldn't have eaten before, that allows us to maintain our stocking rate and extend those grazing events. Extend the time between the grazing events, okay? So we have to more effectively utilize the forage and all the other plants that we're growing while extending that time between those grazing periods, those grazing events. But you say, well, okay, I don't do any tillage. I don't put a lot of chemicals on. I don't do anything. How many of you do this? Hay, okay? And don't get me wrong, I understand, this is the land. It snows. They tell me it snows once or twice up here. Is that right? A little bit? Has it been bad this winter? Not as bad as normal. So from a soil health standpoint, what does this do? This one has been another one that's been really, really eye-opening for us. So you think about it. Okay, you got a big, tall canopy of grass. Man, the soil's nice and cool. Earthworms are close to the surface. Biology's close to the surface. We come in, we hay it off. And boy, those disc mowers, man, they can get it right down there now, can't they? We come in and we hay it off. What do we do to soil temperature? What do we do to moisture in the soil? We dramatically decreased it. So, that biology in the soil, it's, and we'll talk more about this and see some pictures of it in a minute, it's considered subaquatic. Most of the organisms in the soil, earthworms can move and some others can move around a little bit. Most of them swim. And they move on the film of water on the soil particles. So when you come in and you dry that water out, or you dry that soil out in that top 3 or 4 inches, what do you do to their ability to move? Well, you just take it away, don't you? So if they can't move, they either go dormant or they die. And they do a little of both. They do a little of both. Haying, I have decided that haying is from a soil health standpoint and a soil biology standpoint, haying is about this close to tillage in its disturbance. And so I'll show you a picture in a minute, but what's next? That's next. The rainfall simulator, and I'll just talk to you when I get to it. That's this afternoon. You got to come back this afternoon. Now this doesn't disturb the soil at all, does it? Nobody's got fields like this, do they? When I was growing up, my job after school in the spring, about this time right now, maybe a little later after it dried out, was to stick a blade on a 30-20 and go fill all the ruts in on the whole farm. That was my spring break job. We didn't have a spring break when I was in school, but that was what I did. Because after winter of feeding all winter, dragging a tractor out all over, and in those days we didn't even have a front wheel assist tractor. So that was, you got in the same ruts and you stayed in the same ruts because boy, if you got out of the ruts, it was just too soft, right? Nobody does that anymore, right? So look at the damage to this field. And this is just, I took a picture just going down the road. How long is that compaction? How long is that damage from those ruts going to stay in that field? Years. So it's not just the disturbance of the hay, of the action of removing that hay. It's also the disturbance from feeding it. So why do people rely on so much hay in the winter? It's just the way it's always been done, right? It's just the way it's always been done. And I'm not saying that there's not, and I'll talk more about this afternoon, there's not a need for hay. Obviously there is, okay? If we're going to have livestock in the winter, we're going to have some stored feed. But probably not near as much as we think we do. So simply looking at it from the damage to the soil standpoint, that's what I'm doing right here, is there's just tremendous damage in situations if we don't do it. You know, what we do in our operation, we'll feed a little hay, but I'm only going to feed that hay on frozen ground. You know, like right now when the thaw's coming out, we're going back to pasture. We have enough stockpiled forage remaining right now to go from now till green up. That's when I see the most damaging time. I don't have a problem with somebody feeding hay in the winter when the snow's a foot deep. You know, that's great. But boy, when the snow melts like it is right now, right here, how much damage do you do for the next 30 days feeding hay in the mud? Damage to the animals, damage to the land, equipment. How hard is it to do that? You know, so this is the time from right now until green up. That's when all your damage occurs from a mud standpoint.
Question.
Sir?
Do you consider 4-foot hoof prints or 4 inches deep hoof prints to be tillage?
4-inch deep hoof prints to be tillage. So is that in a pasture situation, a perennial pasture? Or an annual?
Pasture.
In pasture. Okay? So,
The point is in our heavy clays,
yep.
when we start losing snow,
Yep. It gets soft.
and
I understand.
I can sacrifice a small area,
Yep.
or I can turn them out and let them turn 80 acres into what looks like a hog lot.
Yep. So when it gets muddy like it is, like it's getting to be right now. So when you take a vehicle or a tractor and you drive out across a field the first time, you might you know, cut a little track, right?
No.
Gets deeper. Okay.
You're hoping you get back home.
You're hoping you get back home. Okay, so the point is, so when you drive across a field and then you turn around and you come back in the same track, are you going to be deeper? That's coming back the second time in that same track?
Sure.
Okay? It's the same with livestock. You know, I think if you have a very thick mat of grass with a thick root system, the damage is going to be much, much less than if it's a short grazed off field. Right? Roots are always a reflection of above ground biomass. And I'm not saying there's not going to be some wet times, okay? You know, what we see though is that wetness is for just a very short period of time. How long before that that saturation begins to start settling out after the snow melts? Just a few days, isn't it? Weeks?
I usually figure 1 month of mud season like that it's
Okay.
bottom barrel.
No bottom to it.
China.
Really?
NRCS has approved most of our subsoil in Okanagan County to be used
So-
for liners of manure storage.
Well, ours is too.
I'm just saying, our water don't go and it's right there for about a month.
So that's because your soil's really crappy. You got to fix the soil first. That's what I'm saying. And you do that with management. You can change that. You know, I saw a picture. Where was the picture that we saw that was right over there? That on one side of the road had standing water, and on the other side of the road, because of the plants they'd used, the mixtures they'd used, had no standing water. Okay, where's that vendor at? He's over there. Oh, he's still sitting over there. See, I just gave a plug for you. He wasn't even there to wave. So what I'm saying is the same thing. We see pictures like this. We see damage done like that all the time. But when you begin to have longer rest periods, when you begin to build more biomass into that system, more organic matter, that's going to change those soils, and it's not going to happen in 1 year. Okay, I'm not going to lie to you. It's not going to happen in 1 year. Yep.
So, based on the question, is that a better transition situation than the tractor runs?
The better transition to me would be keep them moving. Okay, when I see the most damage that occurs long term is when they're in a field 2 or 3 days, or 3 or 4. If they're in one strip, the way we manage it is that in the spring, from now for the next month, they're never in one strip more than 1 day. Because the damage that we see occurs not the first day. Okay, you got some pugs, you got some stuff, but you know what? It's pretty shallow. If you've got a good root mass, that's going to hold them up. You know, that root mass, so how do snowshoes work? It's surface area. They spread the weight out. So if I've got a really thick mat of grass plus roots, is that individual footprint going to be less impactful? It is, isn't it? I'm not saying you're not going to have some pugs. You are. But the trick is never let them come back and take a second step in that footprint. Have them there one day, move them on. You know, some springs are going to be worse. Some springs are going to be better. As you can build into that system, I think that damage is going to be less and less, even in an environment like this. You know, I was down in Tennessee and did the same thing, did a talk down there 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. And we went out to a place that had been doing this, and he didn't have near the damage that the neighbors did. Okay? And I understand you guys probably have got way worse conditions than we do, but we can get pretty wet in the spring too. Okay, we've got clay pan soils, same stuff. But how you manage them makes a difference. That the link compaction is a function of time, not the individual step of the cow. It's how many steps they take there, how long they're there.
Like, is there a certain number, organic matter-wise, where we'll start to see a difference? I mean, if we're at the 1 to 2% level, and we try what you're saying right now on these heavy clay soils.
Yeah, you know, and that's a great question. And I don't know, you know, as we started seeing stuff get up in the 3 to 4 range, we started seeing some pretty significant changes. Because that you know, when we can get up into 3 to 4, and we've got some stuff in the 5s now, we start seeing huge changes. I think I don't know that it's like a linear straight line. I think that as you build organic matter, then it gets better, and then it becomes more exponential instead of linear. So I think that's got to be a focus. We've got to focus on from a soil health standpoint. We've got to focus on reducing hay because it is of the damage it's doing to the soil, and we've got to focus on reducing the feeding of it in those muddy times. Feed it when it's frozen. Feed it when the snow's on. I got no problem with that.
Okay.
I'm not going to get to the end of my talk here.
I'm in the same situation. My husband row crops on the grazer.
Yep.
I've got about 100 acres fenced. We've got 300. And so the cows are on corn stalks right now on a 40. It's going to go back into soybeans in the spring. It's my sacrifice 40. And I mean, my little chore tractor is 135 horsepower duals, so I'm
Yep.
not really rutting it up. But, you know, that's kind of, that field was also stripped to the topsoil, and so it needs the organic matter from the cows. So I eventually want to get to the point where I can rotate them through, but I can't pencil and paper it out to my husband that I should get some more land. And he says, well, I can put it in row crops, so you just pack them in for the winter. How do you get there where you've got enough land and enough pasture that you can keep the cows moving through?
That's a good question. Yeah, the question is she's got some pasture, 100 acres of pasture and a couple hundred acres of row crop. And so how does she get to the situation where she doesn't have that confined area? You know, does he use cover crops on the?
Everything I'm going to graze goes into cover crops.
But not the rest of
The
it.
rest of it isn't yet. I'm still working on it.
So that'd be the first thing. I look at it as you don't have 100 acres, you got 300 acres. He just farms 200 of it and you graze it all winter. And that's what, and I'll show some pictures here later on of grazing some tall cover crops. You know, that's one thing. We don't have any row crops. But I tell you what, if I did, every acre of it would be in some type of a cover crop that I could graze. Just tremendous opportunities to do that. So that'd be the first thing I'd look at is getting some cover crops on the rest of those acres so that you can start moving through that whole system. Now, in that situation, a true crop field like that, I probably wouldn't even take the chance on grazing it in the spring. I'd graze those in the winter. But diversity, and I'm running out of time here. Diversity. There's 4 plant types basically, and I know you guys are mainly cool season grass up here. Okay, I got to tell you, I do believe, I've talked to Jason quite a bit, Jason Roundtree, and I think there's a big opportunity for warm season grass here. From a moisture standpoint, this is an old study out of Nebraska. This is pounds of water to produce 1 pound of dry matter. The cool season grasses are just so inefficient compared to the warm season grasses. Warm season grasses take half as much water to grow a pound of forage as the cool season grasses do. That's one reason why the row crop guys are kicking our butt. They really are, because because they're if you look at corn, it doesn't take as much, but also it's capturing sunshine in the middle of the summer, isn't it? It's really picking up sunshine with an actively growing plant. What's our cool season grasses do? And you guys are probably a little better up here than me, but would you say on the longest day of the year that your cool season grasses is growing the fastest? It's not. Our cool season grasses, longest day of the year, most sun of the year, and what's your cool season grass doing? It's shutting down. It's just barely hanging on. That's one reason why the row crop guys are kicking our butt, because they've got an actively growing plant. So I think we've got to have plants that are actively growing. If you want a prairie soil in Michigan, you're going to have prairie plants, not cool season plants that came from a whole different continent. Diversity. A couple of different slides here that just show diversity. The more functional groups that you have, cool season, warm season, grass, broadleaf, even shrub, the higher production goes, the higher biomass goes, because you've got plants that grow in the cool season. You've got plants that grow in the summer, in the warm season. You've got different leaf structures. You've got different heights of plants. You've got a lot of different things that grow at different times to fill that niche. You're not relying on one season and one plant. You've got a lot of different niches out there, and we need to fill every one of them. Species diversity. We rely on mixtures that have 2 or 3 or 4 species in them. When we get over here 20, 30 species, that's when we begin to really pick up volume and biomass. That's when we begin to really produce to the potential of our land, because we've got plants producing all year long. There's something growing, something converting moisture, minerals, and sunshine to plant material. We got tremendous root diversity in a prairie as well. If these plants, even if some of these plants right here, that's a compass plant. Here's bluegrass. Look at the above ground and the root mass. So one of these plants, even if my cows don't eat this plant has a purpose in my field. This plant's purpose is to pull up minerals. It's to pull up moisture, because these roots are not like an impervious PVC or metal pipe. They're leaky. As they bring up water, they start leaking it off to other plants. They start feeding it with nutrients. They start swapping biology back and forth. We've got to have diverse root structure, diverse plant structure. There's no monoculture in nature, and there's a reason for that, because they have no resiliency in tough times, droughts, wet conditions, dry conditions. What's diversity's effect on soil health? 2 fields right here, field 1 and field 2. Guess what? Came from my place. Across the hill, one side to the other. One is a monoculture still. The other we've actively worked to introduce warm season species. Still got cool season. It's got broadleaf. The Haney test is a soil test developed by ARS to look at biological and chemical properties, and then it uses 5 variables to assign a score. The Solvita test is simply a respiration test to look at biologic activity. Field 1 is the monoculture. Field 2 is a diverse mixture. From a soil health standpoint, Double. When we add diversity, double the soil health score. Going from a monoculture of cool season grass and legume to a diverse mixture of cool and warm and grass and broadleaf. Okay? Same soil type, same management. One side of the hill to the other side of the hill. Again, your warm season stuff. This was an old study from our Plant Materials Center in Ellsbury. They looked at an 8-inch cube, and they came up on an 8-inch cube and then extrapolated that out to a per acre basis, 14,000 pounds of roots on a big blue stem compared to all your cool seasons at 3,000 and 4,000. Brome, maybe 7,000. That's the difference in holding those cows up. Having 18 or 14,000 pounds of roots versus 3,000 or 4,000 pounds of roots in the soil. Which one is going to spread that weight out more? Is my time up?
Doug, we can give you about 10 more minutes. One of
Okay.
our speakers for the next session is sick.
Okay.
So you got 10 minutes.
Okay, awesome, awesome. I knew that food poisoning I put out there last night's going to work, huh? So how do we get that diversity? You know, here's a great picture of a pasture from several years ago. How many of you, and be honest, how many of you say, man, that is a weedy mess? Okay? I got a few honest people, thank you. Okay? That's mine. I'm not gonna be ashamed of that pasture. Look at the diversity in that. Okay? Most people would have bush hogged that in the middle of summer, wouldn't they? You would, wouldn't you? I got to tell you, probably 20 years ago, I would have too. But once I began to learn the value of diversity, so this is in the fall. This is October. This is several years ago here. So what's our energy to protein from a nutritionist standpoint in our cool season grasses in the fall? What are we short on? We're short on energy, aren't we? We got lots of protein. We're short on energy. So the day before, the polywire was right here. Okay, moved it over to here. What do we have here that we don't have back here now? All of this white heath aster, the seed heads off of this white heath aster. What were they eating those seeds for?
Protein.
Energy. Energy. It's a grain at that point. They're going for energy. They got the protein in the grass, the cool season grass. They needed energy. They were selecting all of the seed heads for energy. You know? Does that kick me out of a grass-fed program? I don't know. But without that diversity in there, all they're going to graze is going to be the cool season grasses, right? We've got to have that diversity in there. And then our cows will learn. If you teach them to eat all those different things, they will learn to eat them. They will learn. Okay? That grazing and rest period determines how this probably hadn't been grazed for, probably for 3 months. Probably a 90-day rest period. Now, again, you guys are farther north, that's probably not going to be needed to be quite that long. Your days are longer. You're going to get that recovery a little quicker.
Question on that pasture, did you plant that?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. This was a place I bought in 2000. So this was 08. And it still looks pretty much like that. We have now went back on this place and added warm season grass into almost everything. Living roots, 2 more things really fast. We got to feed our living roots all year long. The plants are really in control. The plants give off exudates. They give off, depends on the plant, they give off almost 50% of their photosynthetic energy, the energy that they create from sunlight, minerals, and water. They give almost half of that energy off in the form of root exudates to feed the biology. They feed the biology to attract them and have them bring in more minerals, bring in more water, bring in more things that they need. Okay? So those root exudates, they are in that rhizosphere, the area right around the root. The number of organisms in that rhizosphere, this zone right around the root, is 2,000 times higher than in the rest of the soil in general. Because the plant attracts them. and brings them in so that it can from their life and death, from the process that all of that they go through, the plant can control that and utilize all those nutrients. You know, just big numbers. This is just to show that, not the perfect mix, but to show that we've got thousands of pounds of livestock in the soil. And we need to, with thought and with purpose, feed the livestock in the soil. You put thought and purpose into feeding your cows, don't you? You know what they're eating, you look at the nutrition, you plan for the winter. Do you do the same thing for your livestock in the soil? This is what we're talking about. We're talking about organisms in the soil. We can't see them most of the time. Feeding on organic matter. This one's feeding on some organic matter. Again, you don't see any legs, do you? They're swimming. If we don't have moisture, that's why the water cycle, that water cycle is so critical. It's critical to plant production. It's critical to their life. If we let that soil dry out, if we don't keep a canopy, if we don't keep a mulch on that soil, these guys are gone. That's the water cycle is crucial. Okay? Keeping the soil covered all year long. You know, this is a rainfall simulator here. We've got a short canopy. How many of you have seen a rainfall simulator? Okay? I got to tell you, it's probably, in 25 years, this is probably the most eye-opening tool that I use anymore. It's a lot of work to set up, but I'm telling you, it is incredible. I'd have done it in here, but I didn't want to pack it on the airplane. And you can do it inside. I do it inside all the time. The hotels get a little squeamish, though. Short canopy, medium canopy, and tall canopy. Okay? This has got almost 100% cover, doesn't it? But look at the runoff. Look at the runoff here. Another one. This is one we did. This is well-managed pasture. This is the hay field with regrowth on it. It's got some regrowth on it quite a bit. This is a short grazed pasture. This is a tilled field. This is a long-term no-till with cover crop. Look at the runoff here is all we can see. No runoff with a tall, well-managed pasture. Look at the runoff from this hay field. Even though it's got a lot of regrowth on it, doesn't it? Look at the runoff from that hay field compared to the short pasture, compared to the bare tilled field. Obviously, we don't have the sediment in either of these two that we have in here, but look at the runoff. I'm telling you, that water cycle, we don't understand the damage that short grazing and that haying is doing to the water cycle. We really don't. Temperature differences, huge temperature differences. One more slide and I'm done here. So when we have a spill of water, if I poured some water out on the table right here, okay, and I laid a paper towel down on it, what's going to happen to the water? It's going to soak up, isn't it? Is it going to stay in the little circle? What's it going to do? It's going to try to reach an equilibrium moisture content throughout that paper towel. It's going to try to spread throughout the paper towel. Water in the soil does the same thing. When it rains, the water soaks through. If it's there long enough, it soaks to an equilibrium, a moisture content throughout the soil that's uniform. Sun comes out, you got bare soil. It dries the surface, right? What's going to happen that night? It's going to lift moisture to rehydrate that soil. Next day, the sun comes out. It dries the surface again. The next night, it's going to pull moisture to the surface of the soil. I've read some stuff that it can pull moisture 4 feet. So if we've got bare soil, not only are we not capturing the rain to begin with, then we're losing it to evaporation. Several books out here, and this is it right here. So a lot of different books. This is a great book, Teaming with Microbes. It's written actually by some gardeners. It's not scientific at all. It's very easy to understand. This one is the soil biology primer is available online. Of course, then Holistic Management has got some great stuff about the water cycle in it. One Straw Revolution, it really talks about working with nature and diversity. It really is a good book. The last three, don't read those three unless you want to get really scared. I'm dead serious. Okay? They all talk about the collapse, looks at civilizations and the history of the world and what made them collapse. When they wore their soil out, they collapsed. This guy right here, David Montgomery, is a geomorphologist. You know, he's got a good YouTube that is the short version of his book. You know what he gives the world estimate on its soil right now? 50 to 75 years. We're through erosion and through desertification, 50 to 75 years. That's not very long, is it? That's how fast we're degrading the land on a global basis today. It is happening. You know, I mean, I see fields all the time. I've seen fields in Missouri that they abandon because they won't grow foxtail this tall. They're so eroded and so worn out. We're a great country, but I'm telling you, as we continue to erode and degrade our land to feed the rest of the world, we're not going to be immune to that. We're not. So unless you want to be scared, don't read those last three. And I'm done. Sorry I went over.
Okay, we got time for a couple of questions for Doug. So, question in the back.
Yeah, go ahead.
You make it sound like putting up hay is the worst thing we can do.
Yeah,
And,
that was my intention.
well, what do we got to do to keep making hay and not make it the worst thing we can do?
Yeah, he said I made it sound like making hay was the worst thing, and what can we do to get away from that? You know, like I said, I realize we're going to have some hay in the winter. So where I would start is anytime the snow is not so deep that the cows can't graze, have them grazing, mud or no. You're going to make that better. Because as you quit haying, your soil's going to get better, and then the mud's going to get better. I realize it's kind of a catch-22, but if you don't start somewhere, you're not ever going to get there. So that'd be my first thing is anytime, for the next 30 days here, till grass greens up, you know, they would be grazing. For me, that was the big revelation. You know, that was what changed our operation was realizing, you know what, the only time I should be feeding hay is when the cows physically can't graze. So we quit. We used to bale hay, and about 10 years ago we quit. We buy what hay we need now. You know, there's people all the time right now that'll sell me hay for less than the value of the NP and K in that bale of hay. If I can buy hay less than the value of the NP and K in it, I'm crazy to bale my own hay. I really am.
Does cutting it higher help?
Does cutting it higher help?
6 to 8 inches?
Obviously it will. And I would sure do that on what acres I would have to hay. But again, from what we're seeing, you know, and I know the Dakotas have done some stuff, and that's going to be coming out. They took big soil cores and hay fields versus non-hay fields across the fence, and they looked at the bulk density. The damage that we do long term to that hay. Okay, well, if we replace the NP and K, you know, that's gonna take care of the hay, right? That was our thought. But I'm here to tell you, I don't think that's true anymore. You know, I saw some old stuff, and I've got to go through it a little better from Kansas, that looked at carbon loss at depth in hay fields. At carbon. You know, we can replace all the NPK we want, but what about that carbon loss? You know, I just don't think we understand the damage that we're doing to those hay fields. So I understand we've got to have some. I'd buy it if I could. I'd buy everything I could and not bale any from my own land. That'd be where I'd start.
That sounds like Jim Garish, you know, get the hay out, and I appreciate that, but I don't believe stealing the minerals from your neighbor is the answer to the big answer to the problem.
So do you drive a car? You're stealing somebody's oil. It's a free country. It's a free world. We all have, you know, things that we do. So if we go by that belief, then we all better start walking because we're stealing somebody else's oil.
No.
Why not? It's a natural resource. What about your house? Are the trees that you built for your house, did they come from your land? No. We trade natural resources all the time. We do. Because they're renewable in most cases.
Okay, last question here in front, then we're done.
You talk about having the diversity in your pasture,
Yeah.
educating your animals to graze the things that they don't prefer. How do you keep them from overgrazing their preferred things in the pasture?
You limit their time. You increase the stock density enough so that they graze the unpreferred plants to the same level as the preferred plants. And that comes with higher stock densities and reducing the time that they're on there. And then giving it a longer recovery time. You increase the stock density enough and there will be no selection. We've bred our cows at low stock density grazing. We've bred our cows to be highly selective. We need to now breed our cows to be non-selective grazers. That's a term from Johan Zeitzman from South Africa. We need cows that go out there and aren't selective. They need to go out there and they need to eat everything that we put in front of them.
Well, there are weeds such as thistle that they won't touch anything. What do you do there?
The only thing that my cows won't eat is the long thorns on a thorn tree. Thistles, piece of cake.
Okay, with that, Doug will be back this afternoon at 1 o'clock in this room talking more specifically about the grazing animal and its management and the impact on soil health. So let's give him a round of applause.